Hi, everyone. Welcome to the October Layer 7 office hours. I'm Pam Disa. I'm the marketing manager for Layer 7. This is the first time we've used this platform, so I wanted to make sure you all understand you're hard muted when you first join. And we will, during the presentation, if you have questions, you can type them in and we will see them come in and address them after the presentation. And also after the presentation, everyone will be unmuted so that you can come off mute and ask questions directly of the presenter, which our presenter today is Gary Vermeulen. And just a quick couple of other things I wanted to mention before we get started. Next week is API World in Santa Clara, California. Just wanted to remind everyone of that. We do still have free passes. If you are interested in a free pass, feel free to reach out to either myself or Aaron White and let us know, because we definitely have some more to give away. And then lastly, I want to make sure next month is November, and we are moving our office hours to a different day of the week. Actually, I'm sorry, a different week of the month. So instead of the last week, which is a holiday here in America, it's Thanksgiving, we have moved next month's office hours to Thursday, November 21st. And we had to move it to 10 a.m. for that one day because someone else already had the 11 a.m. slot. So just to let you know, sort of a heads up there, and I will be sending out a reminder, of course, and allow you to register for next month's office hours. All right, that's it from my side. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gary.
Thanks, Pam. Before I get started, I will be talking about a couple of features that haven't been released yet, and so just taking the disclaimer quickly. All right, let's get started. So today I'm going to be focusing on how to deploy and manage the Layer 7 gateway in Kubernetes. The focus will be on the Layer 7 operator. This should still serve as a good starting point for some of the questions that you might have going through a transition from the appliance or software gateway to the container gateway running in Kubernetes. We'll start with a very quick overview of what Kubernetes operators are and our traditional versus cloud native architectures and how those apply to the container gateway. Transitioning away from the appliance or software gateway to the container gateway is something that more and more of our customers are doing. So with that, I'll cover a basic overview of how to start that process and what your options are. Finally, I'll cover some of the latest updates that'll be part of the latest version of the operator, which is currently scheduled for sometime next week. That'll be version 1.1.0. And from there, we'll head into a few different demos. So what is a Kubernetes operator? So Kubernetes is great at managing applications from a generic standpoint. What Kubernetes doesn't have is domain-specific knowledge or expertise about any one application. So Kubernetes can run something like a database technology A, but it's not going to have domain-specific knowledge or expertise about how that database should be updated, upgraded, failure scenarios, etc. So to avoid application developers needing to create and maintain their own versions of Kubernetes, the concept of custom controllers was introduced. So operators are software extensions to Kubernetes. They make use of custom resources. In the case of the Layer 7 operator, we have the gateway custom resource, which is everything related to gateway. And we have the repository custom resource, which is effectively allowing you to do policy and config as code and GitOps, as you'll see later on. We also have an L7 API and an L7 portal custom resource as well. That works with our portal integration example. I'm not going to be focusing on that for today's demo or today's demos, but that may be something that we cover in more detail in the future. So custom resources, so operators use custom resources to manage applications and their components. Operators follow Kubernetes principles. The most notable is going to be the control loop, and that's very simple. Observe, hey, did something change? Analyze, do I need to do anything? And if I need to do anything, act by turning the desired state, which is the configuration of your custom resource, into reality, which is what's actually running in the Kubernetes cluster. So with the controller pattern or the operator, that enables us to take code and expertise, domain-specific knowledge and expertise, and turn that into code to manage our application. In that case, so in our case, that's the gateway. So running in the cloud is nothing new to the Layer 7 gateway or the Layer 7 platform in general. We've had customers successfully running the gateway in cloud environments for many years. The container gateway is much newer than the appliance or software gateway, but the principle as far as our recommendations with things like the external MySQL database, the way that you should deploy things, remains the same. What I wanted to highlight here is outside of all of the additional work that we're doing from a gateway perspective to do things like distributed states, making sure that things like telemetry data is open and accessible to multiple observability backends with things like OpenTelemetry integration, is that the Layer 7 operator can operate in this model. So the Layer 7 operator supports ephemeral gateways, which I'll go into a bit more detail on the next slide on, but it also supports database-backed gateways. So if you wanted to start transitioning to the container gateway, you could either start with the Helm chart or the Layer 7 operator directly, while maintaining any automation workflows through CI/CD pipelines with RESTman at the GMU that you've already created. So you can start that process of transitioning at any pace that you would like. So quickly moving to cloud native architecture. So one of the key differences between the previous architecture and this one is that there is no MySQL database. So that doesn't mean that you can't have a MySQL database as mentioned, but for the purposes of sort of moving to full ephemeral, which is effectively the gateway not having an external MySQL database for its policy store, not having a MySQL database is kind of the target of that. So these gateways, as mentioned, are running in ephemeral mode. What that means is they don't have an external policy store. The ephemeral mode is not something that's new to the container gateway. It's been around for several years now. What is new is the Layer 7 operator. So the Layer 7 operator is uniquely capable of talking to these ephemeral gateways, and because they are ephemeral, they don't have any concept of clustering. So if you update one, you're not going to implicitly update the other one. And so the operator is uniquely capable of doing that with ephemeral gateways. The Layer 7 operator is monitoring the gateway custom resource, the repository custom resource, and L7 APIs and L7 portals. We're not going to go into much detail on the new ground to cloud agent, which is currently an experimental integration for our developer portal. We're just going to focus on gateway and repositories. So the operator is also monitoring secrets and config maps that may be related to the gateway custom resource or the repository custom resource. Prior to the version 1.1.0 update, which will be released at some point next week, hopefully, you would previously define a repository as having a Git source of truth. So something like GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLabs, etc. And you would have an external dependency from the operator on that source of truth. So with the latest update, we have a new repository type, which is of type local. And effectively, that's referencing a secret with a repository custom resource. And in that, you can have all of your configuration defined with something like Argo CD or other tooling outside of your Kubernetes cluster. And when you push that into your Kubernetes cluster, everything that the operator needs, everything that the gateways need is all inside your Kubernetes cluster. And so there's no external dependencies. So you're eliminating those external dependencies. And that's also something that I'll show today. All of the stuff on the right is pretty much the same as the previous diagram. So this works or should work with ephemeral gateway, with database-backed gateways, and so on. So quickly moving on to the different deployment options that you have. So from a side of moving from the appliance or software gateway to the container gateway, we have, as generally available, Helm charts. We have Helm charts for the gateway, which includes the OTK and portal. It is an easy transition point from the appliance or software gateway. The Layer 7 operator is currently in preview. What that means is that you'll be able to use the Layer 7 operator in production, but you have to have a conversation with us first. So you'd have a chat with our product management team, and we would approve you to use the Layer 7 operator in production. That doesn't stop you from trying out the Layer 7 operator. The link is here. I'll also go to the Layer 7 operator during the demo as well and show you different places that you can use to get started really quickly. So the Layer7 operator manages the gateway custom resource, which is everything related to gateway, repositories, which facilitates policy and configures code. It was designed from the ground up for DB-less or ephemeral operation, but as mentioned, it also works with MySQL-backed gateways. So you're not limited using the operator going full ephemeral immediately. It's something that you can do gradually over time. So it is a good starting point to get started with the container gateway in Kubernetes. The Layer7 operator also has many more features than you would get using the gateway Helm chart. So if you were looking for more features or more management of your gateways done by the operator, then that would be a great place to start. The configuration options, if you're looking at moving from the Helm chart to the operator, are fairly similar, as you'll see. So as you'll see in the demo, if you're familiar with the gateway Helm chart, the configuration options for the most part are the same. The operator does have more configuration options available as well. The operator is also available on Operator Hub and also the OpenShift operator catalog. So if you have OpenShift, then you can go to the Operator Hub on OpenShift and you can install it using the Operator Lifecycle Manager. So for this, I wanted to cover a very, very basic high level how to transition overview. So many of our customers are currently going through in some form this process at varying levels, at sort of varying levels of progress through this. We do have, for some of the more in-depth differences between the appliance and software gateway and the container gateway, available on Tech Docs in the Learning Center. There's an article called Thinking in Kubernetes, which covers the differences in a bit more detail. So feel free to take a look at that. So as mentioned, when thinking about moving from the appliance to the software gateway, the appliance or software gateway to the container gateway, you've got two options that will give you a supported path to getting to the container gateway. So the first is the Layer7 operator, which as mentioned is in preview, and you also have the gateway Helm chart. So the main thing during this initial transition process is the investment that you've got in your existing CI/CD. So that would probably be RESTman or the Gateway Migration Utility or GMU, or processes that you might currently be doing with Policy Manager like debugging. We don't want to change those processes initially. We want to gradually change things over time. So you can migrate to the container gateway while retaining your existing CI/CD workflows, your existing automation workflows, and you can and you can start moving things over sort of more slowly going forward. So phase two, you'd be looking at changing the management interface that you're using. So that would be changing from RESTman or the GMU to GraphMan. So your existing automation, as mentioned, should work the same way with the container gateway, and this process can be done in parallel. So as you'll see in one of the demos, you can go as slow as one service at a time from moving to GraphMan. So this doesn't have to be something that you do all at once. You can start slowly migrating your configuration from RESTman to GraphMan. GraphMan has more features than RESTman does. It has newer data formats as well, so it's all JSON versus XML. And in general, it's much, much faster to export things from gateways, import things to gateways. So it's definitely worth moving over to that. So that is the REST-based interface of the gateway versus the GraphQL management interface of the gateway. And in this, we're still using a container gateway that's backed by an external MySQL database. So we're not changing these workflows too much. We're gradually moving over to the new way of doing things. And finally, if you want to go to phase three, which is going full ephemeral, then that's going to be changing from a container gateway. At this point, you're familiar with Kubernetes, you're familiar with how GraphMan works, and you have and you've migrated your workflows to all be using GraphMan. So you're very familiar with the way that works. And the only transition point would be to use the Layer7 operator to remove dependency on the MySQL database. So that changes slightly the way that you might be doing things from an automation standpoint. To instead of using your existing external workflows, you'd be using Git for your source of truth. You'd be using Kubernetes in the form of Kubernetes secrets and config maps. And in the case of the experimental portal integration example that we have, as that progresses, you might also use Portal with the ephemeral gateway as well, and the operator doing the operator facilitating the application of policy and config as code. But you get multiple configuration sources. One of the biggest benefits of this approach is idempotence. So you can have a gateway deployment in data center 1, which may be in region 1, data center 2, region 2. Because everything is config and policy as code, you're going to get the same result deploying the gateway into those different environments. So something that becomes more repeatable, you're not dependent on a MySQL database, which means that scale is something that you can do much, much easier as well. So before I go into a few different demos, I'll quickly cover the latest operator updates. This is pending version 1.1.0, and as I've mentioned, we're looking at hopefully having that out sometime next week. Obviously, there's no guarantees on exactly when that'll be, but that is the sort of current plan. So the first is local reference repositories. I did make mention to the fact that you can define everything in Git and have that applied to your Kubernetes cluster. So local reference repositories facilitates that. You're using a Kubernetes secret as your source of truth that you can update externally, and we'll actually go through and update one of those in this mode as well. With that, there's 0 external dependencies, so the operator doesn't need to go out to Git or to an HTTP endpoint or anything like that. And it also facilitates more GitOps use cases. So declarative GitOps with Kubernetes, which is effectively what one of the demos will show as well. The other thing that we have, which works in a very similar way, is trusted certificate support. So you can use Kubernetes secrets to keep track of your trusted certificates. We also have gateway-driven custom resource entity management. That gives you the ability to create, update, and delete the following entities. So cluster properties or cluster-wide properties, gateway listen ports, private keys, stored passwords, and trusted certificates. So all of these, so private keys, stored passwords, and trusted certificates are referenced to Kubernetes secrets as well as your configuration source. And cluster properties and listen ports are currently config maps that get generated directly from the configuration that you have in your gateway custom resource. So I'll show you all of these shortly. We also have automatic gateway restart on config changes. So the way that Kubernetes works, if you have a deployment and you're referencing a config map, if the config map changes, that doesn't constitute the deployment changing. And so Kubernetes doesn't implicitly restart the deployment. So we have a new flag for this. So if one of the configuration items changes, then the gateway will automatically be upgraded. We also have automatic resource cleanup as a new addition. So if you create a route or an ingress, a pod disruption budget, or a horizontal pod autoscaler as part of your configuration, if you decide later on to disable that, then the operator will attempt to clean that up if the operator is the one that created it. So it looks at the owner references for those. And as mentioned, we also have the experimental API developer portal integration. So there'll be an example for this in the main branch of the operator, and we will provide more details of that on that in the future. Okay, so moving into a couple of demos, I'm going to try and switch between as few screens as possible for this. And I do have to go into an IDE for one of them, but for the time being, we can just stay in this very, very simple HTML page. So this is not a new product that we're providing. This is just something that I've created to showcase some of the different things that'll be updated. So we've got currently one gateway pod in our gateway deployment. It's called Demo Gateway. The actual gateway itself is called Demo Gateway. And as you can see here, we've got a bunch of different key values. So this is for the cluster-wide property bundle, and there's a checksum there. And this is how we keep track of all of the configuration that's been applied to our ephemeral gateways. If we were using a database-backed gateways, then we keep track of it at the deployment level because we just need to apply it to one gateway versus all of them. So one of the new features is being able to change any of this configuration and have that automatically applied to the gateway, whether that's creating it, updating it, or deleting it. So I've got a gateway custom resource here. If you're familiar with the gateway Helm chart, many of these configuration parameters will look very similar. So very, very simple things like changing the replicas. You've got things like the license and the version and so on. So the features that you won't see in the gateway Helm chart are referenced to things like external secrets, external certs, external keys, and so on. So let's go ahead and update one of these things here. So we will enable one of these external secrets. So Kubernetes secrets are dictionaries that can contain multiple key value pairs. And so you might have a secret in Kubernetes that has multiple keys in it. So that is supported from an operator perspective, and you can also have a one-to-one mapping as well. So there's a single one, we've got one secret present there, and you can have multiple as well. So we'll enable that, and we'll also go to external certs. So let's say that you've had your trusted certificates maintained in some Git repo. You could apply that to Kubernetes, and this would automatically be picked up and updated basically in real time. So let's apply those two things, and we should see some updates on the screen. So we can see we've got one secret that we've enabled, but we've added multiple secrets to the gateway. The checksums for these have also changed, or in actual fact, they've been added. So we've got that. That multi-cert secret there, and we've got the multi-ext secret there. And there's other stuff that we can do as well. So from a listen port perspective, we can see that we've got an HTTP port that's disabled. We want to enable that, so we can go ahead and do that as well directly in configuration. And this configuration would also apply to things like changing the key that you have on your listen port. So you can do that directly from the custom resource itself. And we have a new feature in Gateway 11.1.1, which is refresh on key changes. So set that to true, and if you change the key, it'll automatically be refreshed as well. So let's enable the listen port there. So we just set that to true and apply, and that listen port has now been updated. So one of the really valuable parts of that from a configuration perspective is doing things like changing cluster properties. So let's take a look at how that works. So the use case here might be related to the new OTL integration work that we have, which is effectively changing the trace config. So let's say you're in production and you have a service that's not performing well. You've got teams reaching out to you saying, hey, this API is not performing well. You want to turn on tracing for it. That's a cluster-wide property. So you could come in, you could turn on tracing for the particular services, the service that's not working. And then when you're done, you can simply remove it. So let's take a look at changing one of these. So we'll change ABC123 to ABC456. What this actually constitutes is ABC123 going away, because ABC123 is no longer declared. So ABC123 is going to be removed, and we're going to be creating ABC456. So that should happen for us almost immediately. And there's ABC456 that's been created. You could also use this for environment switches, so changing from, say, environment blue to green for different backends and so on. So this configuration is very, very useful for sort of day-to activities and keeping all of these different things up to date. I can also do things from a gateway perspective, like changing the replicas. So I'll scale that up to 2 replicas. You'll see a gateway coming up. And in probably about 30 to 40 seconds, that gateway is going to be ready to start receiving requests. All of the configuration will be applied to that gateway as it comes up. So the other thing that we can do as well is look at external keys. So I already have an external key enabled here. Something that you can't see in this is an additional configuration flag, which effectively allows you to set a special purpose key type. And you might be wondering, well, this looks great, but how do I get to the things that aren't configured here, or the things that you aren't showing me here? So we have the Layer7 Operator repository, which is here. You can head over to the wiki. We have guides on how to get started. And we also have a more comprehensive breakdown of the gateway and the repository custom resources. These are experimental, so there's not much on them at the moment. And we also have additional examples which take you through simple use cases, more advanced use cases, and also the OpenTelemetry integration, along with a couple of others as well. We'll also have one there for Portal in the near future too. It's important to note, this is mainly from a Grafana perspective, that we do have a compatibility matrix. So version 1.1.0, when it does get released, we'll be working with Gateway 11.1.1 and later, because of the Grafana dependency there. So if I go to Gateway, I've got a breakdown of all of the different things that I can configure for my gateway. And many of these are similar, or you might recognize them from a Helm chart perspective. Many of these have been accounted for to make sure that we have feature parity between the Helm chart and the gateway custom resource. There is one exception, which is the level of OTK support, which is something that we'll address in a later version of the operator. So we don't have, for the database back gateway, a good way to install the OTK in the operator just yet, but that is something that we'll be addressing in the near future. So let's quickly go down to that configuration item that we're looking at, which is external keys. So we'll get a breakdown of how to configure that. And if we want to, we can go directly to the actual documentation, which is a breakdown of exactly what you can configure along with any documentation that we've added for that. So this gives you a more in-depth view of what the latest things that you can configure in that are. And you can do that for pretty much any one of the configuration options. If there was something that you were thinking of, you can probably come here and it's probably available. If not, you can reach out to us and we'll assist you with that. So the other thing that we have as part of the operator is now this ability to configure local repositories. Well, what that means is that we can take a JSON bundle or a GraphMint bundle, which is in JSON format, so very simple and easy to read. And we can apply that to a Kubernetes secret, and then we can create a repository that references it, and it'll be applied directly to our gateway. So I'll go into more detail on that, but basically what that facilitates is that we don't need to have any external dependencies to Git or any external source of truth. We can do everything from the configuration that comes down to us in Kubernetes. There is one caveat with this, is that because it's a Kubernetes secret, we are limited to 1 megabyte in size. But you can split the different repositories up into smaller parts so that you can take advantage of this without exceeding that 1 megabyte limit. And just to give you an idea, this environment is currently configured with a few different repositories. This is what a repository looks like. If you were looking at going down the external Git connection, we have examples of this as well in the Layer7 operator, if you wanted to take a look at that as well. But this is effectively the file folder structure that you get. These are all of the entities that are available. And you can go into tree, which is effectively the server explorer in Policy Manager. And you can see all of the different folders and all of the different APIs, templates, and so on. So all of those examples are there. Okay, so to showcase, so before we do that, let's make a change to the service. So the first thing we'll do is call the API. And you can see I get a message back, which is created using a local repository reference. And that is expected, as that's the message that we have displayed there. Let's change that to 123. We'll apply the changes, call the API, and that API has been updated almost instantly, because this has resulted in effectively a kubectl apply -k locally, which has created the secret or updated the secret in Kubernetes. The operator has picked up that the secret has changed, and it's applied it directly to our running gateways. And our other gateways up and running, so it's applied it to both of them. That's managed with this checksum over here, so local reference repository dynamic. And you can see that checksum of that available on both of those gateways. So that configuration is applied directly. So you might notice if we go to gateway 2, that if we refresh this, then we have created using a local repository reference, but we don't have that 123 as we do on our gateway 1. So we also have gateway 1.brcm labs. We got 123 there. We don't have 123 there. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to take the service from 123 from gateway 1, the service from gateway 1, and we want to place that on gateway 2. So to do that, we're going to go into, to do that, we're going to use the GraphMint client. So the GraphMint client is available on the Layer7 community site. You can see different ways to install it. It does have an npm package now as well, so it's super easy to install and get started with. And what I'm going to quickly do first is show you exporting the entire gateway, and then we'll target a specific service. So let me quickly grab this, and I've got a couple of steps that will run here just to show you the different things that you can do in a relatively simple format. So as mentioned, there is a way to install the GraphMint CLI using npm. So in that, you would need to have Node.js, I think greater than version 14 installed on your machines, but I have all of that installed. So let's do an export of gateway default. Gateway default is effectively reference to gateway 1 reference to gateway1.brstreamlabs.com. Okay, so let's do a full export of that gateway. We're going to output it to a JSON file, and that's done, so super fast. I'm going to exploit that. The exploit command is going to put it into a folder structure like this. So like this, and that's going to be very handy to store in source control. You're going to be able to go into the different folders, make changes if you want to, but also just have visibility of the different things that are configured in that repository or on your gateway in general. So I can exploit that. It goes into a folder called full gateway, and I get a similar view. So, so I might want to do things like, hey, I don't want to move my keys across, so I can just drop those out. And I might want to drop my order configuration, or whatever else I would want to drop. And then once I'm done, and I want to bring it back to a sort of simple, single JSON file format, I can just use the implode command. So I can take input, which is my full gateway, that folder, and I can output that to full gateway editor.json. And that's my new configuration. And there's full gateway editor.json. We don't have the keys, and we don't have the order configuration. So both of those have been removed. So with that in mind, we can do a full gateway. We can also target very specific things on the gateway. So for that, we just want to target the API local ref service, because that's changed on gateway 1, and we want to release it to gateway 2. So a very, very simple command to do that. We're going to use Grafman again, and we're going to use the inbuilt utilities to grab a service. We're looking at a resolution path. We could also do folders if we wanted to as well. And we're going to output that to local repository, which is here. And we're going to output that directly to this file here, which is what is currently in our source control. So if I quickly go to run this command, then I should expect that this local repository is going to be updated, and you can see it's been exported of the correct value present there. So we will commit this. So the next thing that we're going to do is commit this to our Git repository. So we'll just add it. We'll add everything. And we'll call it an important update. And we'll push that into our Git repo. Okay, so let's head over to our Git repository quickly and take a look at what we have configured here. So this is something that you would, so this structure is a little bit different to what we previously looked at. This is effectively something that you would use. So this is effectively a customize directory or a file folder structure that works well with customize. So some tools like Argo CD work really well with file folder structures like this. If I go into repositories, you can see that I've got all of my repositories defined as secret names. So there's no external dependencies here. I'm loading everything that I was loading in the previous gateway directly from configuration. And I've got a customization.yaml, which is loading everything. And there's a base with a bunch of other resources that we're loading to. So a quick note on Argo CD. So probably best to just sort of show their website directly. So Argo CD is a declarative GitOps continuous delivery tool for Kubernetes. So if you want to read more about it, then head over to their documentation. So I've got that stood up in my environment. Let me quickly sign in again. And what I can do here is go into my project that I've created, which is demo. So you can see that I have a bunch of different stuff deployed here. This is all deployed from this local repository here, where everything is defined for my gateway deployment. If I go back to gateway 2, then you can see that I still have the previous repository reference there. I don't have the new one just yet. All I have to do to synchronize that is sync that. Argo CD in the background is going to go to this repository, it's going to grab the latest, and it's going to apply it directly into Kubernetes. So click synchronize, and in a couple of seconds, if I come back here, I've now got created using a local repository reference 123. So that's done. Very quick, very easy. Very quick, very easy. And we now have the latest version of our API on both Gateway 2 and Gateway 1, where we created it. So with that, in summary, what I've showed you is some of the latest features of the Layer7 operator, different ways and different things to think about when deploying into Kubernetes. and the different mediums and the different deployment modes that you can go with the gateway as well as some new features that you might not have been aware of. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Gary. That was really good. I'm going to unmute everyone. Or let me say, now you have the ability to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask Gary any questions or discuss any topic at this time.
Hi,
Or
Michael
if you,
here. Sorry.
hi. Yeah.
Hope I'm audible. It needs some time to let this think about and get the correct question. Your last demonstration, when you was changing this, or when you have deployed the new version of the API to the gateway 2, the Argo GIT, or the tool that you've used, that is more or less what has exactly been done by that tool. That wasn't clear to me.
Yeah, sure. So basically, this Argo CD application is associated with this repository. So this repository here, and what I did is I changed the definition here. So I'll quickly go through that again. Let's change it to 456. And what I'm doing is committing to this repository. So I'll just push that up. And if I come back to this repository, I can go to local repository and local repository.json, and you can see I've got local repository reference 123.456 now. If I go back to gateway 2, it'll still be 123. So that hasn't been updated yet. And then from an Argo perspective, what I'm doing is I'm saying, so Argo is linked to this repository here. I'm saying to Argo, go and sync with that repository. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull the latest version of the secret that I have changed, and it's going to apply that into Kubernetes. So that secret is here, local repo secret. So this is going to get updated when I do that sync command, and the operator is running in the background, and that's going to automatically apply that to the gateway. So let's come back here now.
Yeah, got it. Let me just repeat my understanding. So the tool has updated a secret in Kubernetes. The controller has picked it up and took care that the changes in the secret are applied to the pod, so to say.
That's correct. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Gary?
Yes, hello. This is Remco Dekker. I have one question about the versions. Gary, you showed about different versions of the operator and the gateway itself. And there's, yes, that's the one. So if you're on 11.1.0 and you want to go to 11.1.1, so what's the procedure there? Because also the operator changes.
Yeah, so from an operator perspective, the big difference between the different versions of the operator is the compatibility with Grafman. So Grafman in Gateway 11.1.1 became generally available, and so this compatibility matrix will largely fall away as time goes on, and the gateway so as Grafman is now GA, this compatibility matrix will be less and less relevant as time goes on. It's just between experimental and preview of the operator and the version of Gateway, we had to maintain that for different schema changes to Grafman, but that is largely falling away now. So the upgrade procedure, as far as that's concerned, would be changing the tag to Gateway 11.1.1 and then upgrading the operator to the latest version of the operator. So typically, the gateway itself would be, so the operator would technically be forwards compatible with a gateway, because if you add something new in the schema to one of the Grafman entities on the gateway, then it's just not going to have that additional entity, whereas it's not backwards compatible. So if you were using 1.0.7 with 11.1.00, then you'd be applying things in 1.0.7 that 1.1.0 doesn't have. 11.1.0 doesn't have. So it should be forwards compatible in most cases, but it's not backwards compatible. So it would be a case of changing the gateway version and then upgrading to the latest version of the operator, which should just be a simple case of applying the latest install bundle, which will update the custom resource definitions and any other deployment specific things that we've changed.
Okay, I got it. Thank you, Gary.
No problem.
Hello, Gary, it's Vince. One question, I don't know if you've covered it, but would you be able to store your gateway YAML for your custom resource definition in Git and actually point it to itself so that you can have your YAML for your gateway as a source of truth in Git?
Yep. Yeah. So that's what's configured here with the Argo.
That is it.
With the Argo demo.
I'm watching from a phone. Sorry today.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, it's good to cover as well. So the gateway definition is stored on Argo CD. So as mentioned, with this GitOps approach, we have everything defined in our Git repository, and you can see there's a bunch of secrets and config maps that get created. There's the repositories that get created as well. They're all local reference, so they use secrets. And we've got the gateway itself as well. And the gateway then has owner references for all of these things that the operator goes and creates behind the scenes. And then at the end there's our demo gateway. So if we actually wanted to do something like change the number of replicas, we can do that directly on our repository.
Yeah.
Obviously never do this in production, right? Directly to the main branch. But there we go, that's done. And if I sync this now, then we should get a second gateway coming up. And there we go, there's a new gateway starting up.
Cool. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I missed that probably a little bit.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Hi, Gary. Lana here. I have a question.
Hi.
So we were thinking about a way of working for our workflow for using Git. Is there any ideas or planning on making a visual editing tool in order to get your policy into the Git code base instead of using Grafman exports and put it in Git?
So from like a policy manager perspective.
Yeah.
So that is something that we are currently discussing. I can't say that it's something that would be available anytime. So in the, I guess, the next 6 months or something like that. But it is definitely something that we are discussing internally at the moment. It's something that we're discussing. So it's something that we'll probably have some more information on in the near future.
Okay, great, thanks.
But yeah, for the time being, using the Grafman clients is a great way to do that. Reason being, with the Grafman clients is you saw me using that locally here. So I'll open up the other one, which is, I've got too many things open, full gateway. Yeah, so I've got the full gateway and I've got the breakdown of all of the different entities that make up that gateway. So I can do that locally as a developer, but I can also take Grafman, because Grafman is effectively a CLI tool. I can take that into a pipeline and I can do stuff with Grafman and that. And then I can also do additional scripting or additional manipulation on the output JSON. So let's say I wanted to do something like adding a prefix. I could use Node.js or JavaScript to add in an additional prefix to manipulate the JSON. So it's very, very powerful, as far as the Grafman client is concerned.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on, this is Ben Urbanski. I'm just going to add to Gary's answer because it brings up a couple related things. One, there is another person that submitted a question. in the meeting that I answered directly. I'm not sure if everybody can see those questions and answers. But if you're looking for another way of authoring policy outside of Policy Manager, there is Policy as Code, which is a preview feature that lets you represent that policy in more ways, all the way up to a full JSON object, and the JSON definition of an API is exported by Grafman. That lends itself to textual editing of the policy outside of Policy Manager, maybe directly in Git. And then what Gary was also alluding to is we're beginning a new management UI initiative right now. Some of you may have heard us talking about that in some different ways, as early as the beginning of this year, frankly. And definitely on the roadmap for that new management UI, is more direct integrations with Git repositories from inside the UI, much like you would expect to be able to integrate with a Git repository and an IDE, and through the IDE interact with Git to, create branches, check in, check out, merge, submit pull requests, all of those typical activities. But also to Gary's point, we're just beginning that now, and it's going to be a bit of a journey. It's going to take a while to deliver capabilities like that in the new UI.
Yeah, to Ben's point about being able to use policy as code. So this is policy as code. You can see I've got no XML here. It's all JSON, and I can change the stuff that I'm returning directly. Easy to read, easy to change. And I guess you could also do this with, with sort of scripting and stuff like that as well if you wanted to do that. So I can apply that, call that. It's been updated.
Will this, hi Gary, Thijs. Will this viewer, will this be available?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, this view of the gateway settings, will this be available in the future?
Sorry, I didn't get the first part of your question.
I see here the cluster properties and all the policies and all in a nice view from your browser.
Oh,
this functionality will be available as well?
So this is just a demo interface. So to Ben's point, this would be something that we, decide on as far as the next, version of Policy Manager goes.
The first step of it. Okay.
Well, so yeah, this is just a demo. So this is not this is not representative of what it's going to be.
No. Okay.
I think this what you were looking at there is basically, instead of Gary in a command line doing kubectl apply a few things, I just do it from this side, just as an abstraction in front of that. So yeah, the same thing about when you're looking at the information like the source cluster products, those are just Grafman calls. Otherwise, you would have seen it in an external postman or something like that. It's just to bring it together.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess this is another testament to Grafman. So all of this information here, with the so accepting the gateway pods, is all one Grafman call to get all of this detail.
Got it.
Hello, this is Mesut talking. I have a question about the MySQL requirement. With this new architecture, it seems like we will be able to do the development on our local machines, and I wonder what will be the position of the MySQL or MySQL requirement in the future.
So as far as MySQL is concerned, it would become something that is optional depending on the way that you're deploying the gateway. So from a operator managed perspective, the Layer 7 operator is uniquely capable of talking to gateways that don't have an external MySQL database. And so using the operator would be your sort of best bet. You can also use the ephemeral gateway without the operator, but in that case, you would have to bootstrap all of the configuration to your gateways. So when they come up, they have all of the configuration that they need. And then if you wanted to make an update or a change to anything, it could be a cluster-wide property, you would have to change the configuration, and then all of the gateways would have to be restarted to pick up the new configuration. So that's where the ephemeral mode is nothing new, but the operator has a unique capability to integrate or to work with those ephemeral gateways and to create some form or some sense of clustering as far as configuration goes between them.
Yeah, thank you very much. An additional question about this. Do we have a chance to use the gateway without database installation on local environment or on test environments, and in non-pre-production or production environment, we use the MySQL, the existing solution, something like a hybrid installation in non-prod environments. If we can use the operator without MySQL, and in production operator with MySQL.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to be down to the way that you want to architect, dev and prod and so on. So, I would always say test, 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 right? But as far as functionality goes, that would be something that you'd be able to do. For example, this entire environment that you're seeing here is all running on a Kind cluster. So Kind is Kubernetes and Docker. We have, so it's a local dev environment effectively. We've got our additional examples that are all based around Kind. So if I go into the advanced example here, it's going to be based on Kind. You can use other local development environments. So if you want to do something like Minikube or MicroK8s or Docker Desktop, you'd be able to use all of those. But yeah, you can have different, you can have an ephemeral gateway to do development on. It just means that when you remove that ephemeral gateway, all of the configuration is going to go with it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That might be beneficial if you're looking at, hey, I want to create, V1, so API V1X, right? You go on to a fresh gateway, you create API V1X, you export it, and then you throw the environment away. Equally, you could have some local repositories that you're synchronizing to your ephemeral gateways in your dev environment. So you load all the configuration onto your dev gateways from your, from your dev, source control, source of truth, and then you, do updates of that source control based on development work that you've done. So there's a variety of ways that you could do it. I would say there shouldn't be issues with that. Again, test, test, test. But one of the things to note, and so one of the things to note is that when you make changes to something from a MySQL perspective outside of the features that we currently automate, you would need to start using things like mappings and stuff like that to delete services. And those are things that we're continuously working on.
Thank you.
Gary, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, Marco here. So I have a question about the OTK. You mentioned that technically now, so Layer7 Operator can also deploy OTK or is not yet available?
So it's kind of halfway there. So the Layer7 Operator has some experimental work which allows you to install the OTK using the ephemeral gateway. What it doesn't have in terms of database back support is the ability to install the OTK like the Helm chart does. So that's something, so that's something that we have a working item for. I think it's in our next iteration. So it'll be after version 1.1.0. It'll be sometime after that. But it is something that we have on our backlog to do, to bring up the parity in terms of, feature parity in terms of what you can do with the OTK between the two form factors or between the two deployment mediums.
Thanks, perfect.
No problem.
Yeah, Michael here, one more time. Sorry. Potentially, can you elaborate the advantages of having the secrets as my source of truth compared to having an external repository as my source of truth? Not quite sure about the principles here.
Yeah, sure. So so basically you can do both. So you don't have to have your secrets as a source of truth. You can use an external Git for source of truth. The benefits of having your secrets as the source of truth is that you can have everything in an external repository like this one, and or multiple repositories. You can have it split between multiple places. And then when everything gets deployed into Kubernetes, there's no dependency that the operator has on any external sources. So it doesn't need to go out and get something from Git. So let's say Git is down for whatever reason. The operator can't get the latest resource. Whereas if everything is stored in Git, then when you push into Git, then everything becomes so dynamic in the sense that if you change something, it'll be updated, but static in the sense that all of the configuration that you need is there in the Kubernetes cluster, so there's no external calls out.
Thank you very much.
No problem. And that's also kind of a similar model that we're looking at from our portal integration perspective is we do have a ground to cloud agent in that model, which connects to the portal, but the portal basically pushes to a queue. The agent picks that up, and then that configuration then lives inside the Kubernetes cluster. So it's a similar concept for that integration. And with that, we're trying to not necessarily eliminate the external dependencies. If you want to use Git, that's absolutely fine, but just give you the option of not having any dependencies.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
No problem.
Great. I just want to once more remind everyone that our next office hours will be on Thursday, November 21st at 10 a.m. And I also want to just thank you guys for joining. And I will be sending out after this a link to the recording to everyone or even that registered. So even the folks who missed it, or if you want to share it with others, you can do that. They can always listen to the recording. So no, if there aren't any other questions, thank you again, Gary, for doing this. And we will see you next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.